everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Pound for Pound Leader Podcast. I'm Mike Kai, your host. Join me as I drop leadership tips and have insightful conversations with leaders from around the world. I'm so glad that you joined me today. Take a moment and subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. Now, let's jump into this week's episode and take your leadership to the next peak. Okay, well, RD, welcome to the podcast. It's so good to have you.
Mike, it is just my honor, buddy, to be with you, my dear friend.
Thank you so much. Before we get started, I think I want to ask you, what does RD stand for?
You know, my dad had this idea I was going to be a football player, and he wanted me to have a memorable name because there were football players that in that era, like O.J. Simpson, that were highly thought of. So he gave me the name RD, and instead I became a pastor, and no one can remember my name. But it stands for Ryan Dean. But I give people little tips like Chef Boy, RD, or Research and Development, R&D. And I still end up being called JD half the time, but that's okay.
I like it. It seems like in the South, they've got those initials, right? JW King or RD Saunders. I like it. I really do. Awesome.
Thanks, pal.
Yeah. I think RD, I would say RD would be real dynamite. That's what I would call you. RD stands for real dynamite.
I'm going to have you call my wife and tell her, Mike.
Easy. But it's so good to be with you. And, you know, you and I go way back. I mean, we don't go so far back, but we go back enough that I've always been blessed by John Maxwell, yourself, Mark Cole, and maybe about 4 years ago. I think I go back with John a long time ago, even though we never really knew each other at all. Yeah. But, you know, John's been a mentor from a distance. The 21 irrefutable laws, the making of a leader, the developing of a leader. Those were our main staples in leadership maybe about 20 years ago. And I love how John has changed throughout the years, has been incredible, still a go-to author more than even back then. And I remember meeting John Maxwell for the first time. And it might have been like 1990 something. I was on staff, you know, young whippersnapper on staff in Hawaii, and they brought him in. And when they bring him into Hawaii and he's speaking at this Nazarene church and he's got his Diet Coke, okay? His Diet Coke. I don't know, he doesn't drink as many Diet Cokes as before, but he's got his Diet Coke on his podium and he's drinking it in between. And there was a break and I walked straight up to him. With my network marketing background, I was getting confused between a dream and what's a vision. And so it was bugging me. What's a dream? What's a vision? And then I remember going up to him. I said, John, can you please tell me what you categorize as a dream and a vision? And I was a little like, okay, I'm expecting some big, deep thing. And he says, it's the same thing. There's no difference. And I went, okay. And I walked back to my chair going, I had this big question. I was gearing myself up for RD. And he goes, it's the same thing. And I'm so blessed to be able to be in Equip with you and John, and I'm grateful for you. But tell me, how does your history go back to working with John Maxwell?
Well, Mike, like you, I was a pastor for 22 years. And loved serving in various churches. But interestingly, my childhood home, Lancaster, Ohio, was where John's second church was. But I didn't attend that church. I went to a church across town. But I was aware of John in my early teens. And then I went to the college that John attended, where John's dad had been president. And a gentleman that was the very first employee of Equip by the name of Doug Carter was the college president. And so I built this relationship with Doug Carter. Well, many years later, I'm pastoring a church in Georgia, and Doug Carter starts attending that church, and he begins talking to me about being a volunteer as an associate trainer with Equip. And I start teaching for Equip around the world. And began to confide in Doug that I felt like I was being led into a different arena. And that arena was to work in sort of the mission world and do something that was international. And wasn't long after that after years of serving in another ministry, I got a phone call from Doug that he was going to be retiring, and would I be interested in interviewing for his role, which was the director of advancement for Equip and the Maxwell Leadership Foundation. That was almost 5 years ago today. And it will be 5 years, June the 1st, that I've been on the team at Equip as an employee. So that was really how it started. But in all honesty, I hit a wall when I was pastoring many years ago where I realized I needed leadership development. I needed personal growth. The talents I had, the calling I had, the training I had, none of it was enough. I needed something else. And it's like a whole other world opened to me. I've told people that it's like you've lived on the bottom floor of this house, and then one day you find a staircase and you discover there's this really cool upstairs you never knew was there. And that's exactly what happened in my life because of John and meeting him and getting connected and starting to grow. And now many years later, I'm on the team. So it's been an incredible journey with John Maxwell.
So I love it. You pastored a church for 23 years, joined the staff on Equip with John Maxwell 5 years ago. In your 23 years of pastoring a church, and even before that, your years in ministry, and now being with John with Equip, can you tell us, is leadership development different today than it was 5 or 10 years ago? And if it is different, how?
I'll say this. I think if anything, it's more important than it's ever been. And the reason it's more important is that influence has never been more desperately needed and more of a requirement to succeed than it is today. And the reason I say that is years ago, there was a respect that pastors and churches, for that matter, were given. There was a sanctity, even among people who were not people of faith. And there's far less of that now than there was then. So in my mind, the same skills that when you influence with people in your church are important for you to have with those outside your church. But it's all the more critical that you develop the ability to influence in your church, because people aren't just going to follow you because you've got REV in front of your name or letters after your name. You've got to have the ability to influence people.
I think one of the most important things John says is leadership is influence. And regarding that today, you're absolutely right, especially what's going on. This happened in the last maybe 5 years, accentuated that part of where normally maybe in the 50s or 60s, maybe even into the 80s, that would automatically command a level of respect. And I definitely see that in our state that doesn't carry as much weight as it used to. And the infiltration of the influence in every single sphere of society is so important now more than ever. Would you be able to speak to that just for a moment about the streams? John calls them streams, I believe. Different people have called them mountains, gates. Talk to us about influence in those streams of society.
Yeah, my recollection is that Bill Bright initially came to us with this idea of 7 arenas or mountains or streams of influence. One of those streams he originally assigned was the family stream. And we, in our understanding, we believe that the family stream is actually something that exists in every stream and isn't its own stream in the sense that the stream is what I would call actionable. When I talk about something being actionable, I mean that within that stream, there are 2 to 3 or more influencers within a community or even within a country that have influence in that stream. And we just don't believe that there are 2 to 3 people in countries or communities that seem to have that. So family sort of spreads out among the other streams. But when we took out family, we actually added 2. We took out family, but then added healthcare and sports as streams. So if you look at all 8, government, business, education, sports, arts and entertainment, media, healthcare, and finally faith. And we believe those are the 8 streams of influence. And within every country or community, there are 2 to 3 leaders within each of those streams that has influence within the stream, but also has influence oftentimes cross-stream. A great sports leader might have influence in the media stream. A great healthcare leader might have influence in the business stream. Government and education sometimes go together. So we look for people of influence within each of the 8 streams of influence, because in our vision for bringing transformation to the world, we're trying to inspire and work with the top 10% of influencers in any country or any community. And I think the church should look at it the same way, because if you can lead the influencers, you can lead the whole thing.
Yeah, that's great. When I think about, you're probably only the second person that I've talked to that actually would put sports in a different category, in its own category. We've seen that more maybe in the last 3 years than ever before, on how that transcends. Athletes can transcend just their stream and can flow into others. And so if I'm talking to the average person who's above average, by the way, if you're listening to this podcast,
Right.
If I'm talking about the above average person in society that is actually in a stream and they're cross-pollinating, and let's say they are in business at a hotel industry, but at the same time, they have the ability to influence politics. What is the importance? Maybe this is a twofold question, and maybe you can clarify the answer for me. What is the purpose of every believer who does not end up in the faith stream or the religion stream that I belong to? What is their call? How do they make a difference? What's their mandate?
Man, it's hard to divorce ourselves from the concept that God has blessed us, gifted us, and called us to whatever arena in which we find ourselves, therein to make a difference, therein to be a salt and light presence. Salt makes things better, light makes things brighter. And there's no getting away from the fact that calling wasn't just made to those 12 disciples, but it was actually made to all of us on planet Earth, that wherever we go, we are to be influential. Salt and light are illustrations of influence. And we are to be an influence that makes something taste good and makes someone thirsty for it. And that's what salt does. And we're to be an illuminating influence, something that brings truth and understanding and clarity to things. And we certainly have a world that's bland and dark, and us being salt and light within our spheres of influence. We're in that sphere for a reason. It was no accident. And therefore, we're going to stand before God, and I think give an account of how responsible we were to be salt and light within that arena.
I like how you said better and brighter. We should make it better and brighter. When I was working at American Airlines on the ramp a long time ago, I remember another employee that I met on the Big Island just reminded me at the age of 22 years old, I think, or around 22. And she reminded me that I was on the ramp working at American Airlines for Jesus. That was such a concept that I was like, wait, it's not a great job. It's okay. I'm actually making a difference. And then I look back, I did make a difference while I was there. Sure. I definitely made a difference. People came to Christ because of that. And at least I think I left that place better and brighter. I think every person should bring that kind of influence to wherever they work, wherever they play. It's going to be better and brighter because you are there. If you're not being better and brighter, then we're losing our opportunities and we're not maximizing the potential that God gave us. Switching gears just a little bit, what are the greatest leadership adjustments or paradigm shifts that you might have observed recently?
Well, I think if we were to talk to organizational leaders, so leadership and the concept of leading an organization or enterprise, I don't know if this would be a challenge. It is a change, and that is that in many cases we have a distributed workforce. So by that, we have a workforce where there are some people who are working from home, some that work from home part of the time, some that work from home all the time. And so the same ability to develop culture in that setting is quite challenging. You have folks that aren't around you on a regular basis. They're not around you in 3 dimensions, And so how do you embed culture in a setting where suddenly the arena is so different that you're not with those people? So I think that's a big organizational change. You throw in the diversity, in years past, often we had a very homogenized workforce, a very similar team around us. Many of us grew up in the same spots, had the same kind of people around us, had the same way of thinking. Well, now we have people that didn't even grow up on the same continent as us, and they're in a different time zone than us, and they have different cultural realities than us. So I think that's a big challenge for organizational leaders. I think it's a big opportunity myself, because I think you learn something when you're around diversity that you don't know when you're around something that's more.
RD, I also found it interesting that we have about 5 different staff members that don't even live in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And they live in different parts of the world. One's in the Philippines, another person is in North Carolina. We got another one in Phoenix, Arizona, and different parts of the world. I think one of the things we learned is distance learning, and the redistribution of the workforce is something that's here to stay. That's not going away.
It's not. No. And Mike, you bring up an interesting point too. A church staff sometimes, as enterprises go, isn't necessarily big, and yet this is true in your church staff. And you'll have enterprises that have hundreds of people. It's all the more true, and it just illustrates the need for leaders to be growing all the time. Here we've talked about multiple changes in the last 10 years that were unexpected and hugely impactful.
Yeah. So I think that a streamlined workforce, multiple hats, high capacity is definitely the future. It's not about, like, I'd never said, I want a huge staff. No, I don't want a huge staff. I want a staff that is just right, that meets the needs of the people that we care for, that we could reach. John, when John and you and Mark began to take Equip to the next level, tell us a little bit more about the influence of Equip leadership throughout the world.
Yeah, the story of Equip is fascinating. We began in 96, had a very specific focus in 96, wanting to bring leadership training to the world and wanting to take it to the places where they needed it most and had access to it least. And we defined 3 arenas in that season: the college campus, the inner city, and the international community. And after 9/11, it became clear to us that our focus needed to be just the international community. And so we went down that path, and we were incredibly blessed and reached millions and millions of people with leadership training.
Can I ask you a question? Why did you guys decide after 9/11 that the international community versus the inner city and college campuses, you thought that they were well taken care of, that this is your focus? Did you guys feel like you needed to shift, narrow your focus? What was the reason behind that?
Yeah, it was actually a thought that we needed to narrow our focus more than anything else. We put some capable leaders like Tim Elmore over the college campus ministry, and Sam Chan over the inner city ministry. And I know many of your listeners would know both of those men. And they took off and had their own ministry, and Equip stayed very focused on the international community. Part of that too was that seemed like the arena that was getting resources, and that seemed like a clear calling that's the path we should go down. And so it was like an opportunity open to us, like the Macedonian call, you might say, that made it clear that was the direction we should go.
I think it's awesome, because not every organization starts off the way that they thought it was going to be in the very beginning, and to have the courage to say, this is what we're good in, and this is the lane, this is our wheelhouse, this is what works for us. And I think it's worked really well. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted everybody to listen, that even John Maxwell has to change. And something that was already incredibly successful, speaking platforms all over the world, writing books like crazy, but still realize that we had to maybe go an inch wide and a mile deep versus a little bit wider and not as deep as you could go. Please continue. I apologize.
Well, interestingly, Mike, to your point, John then, after incredible success on that international path, set a goal for 1 million leaders being trained, ended up training 6 million. Set a goal to get in most of the countries of the world, ended up in getting leadership training in all 196 countries of the world. And yet the leader John would say, sees more and sees before. And John began to see something that, in all honesty, created a cataclysm in Equip. Many of our leaders, as John began to cast this vision, many of our leaders bailed on being a part of Equip. They said, this is crazy. It makes no sense. I'm not going to support it. John's lost his mind, any number of things. And it required great discipline and strength and confidence for John to stay on the path that he saw. And this path is simply what we would call the path to transformation. And what we felt like is that John was being called to lead us down a path where leadership training wasn't the goal. Leadership training was the tool. In other words, we weren't going to see people trained as our focus. We were going to see the impact of people trained as our focus. And that's when this move towards transformation began. And as things have played out, Mike, we look back on it now, and we started the Maxwell Leadership Foundation, the secular values-based entity that allows us to interface with governments and schools and businesses that maybe couldn't have a faith-based ministry like Equip as their partner. And the base has just expanded now to millions and millions of people being impacted by Equip and the Maxwell Leadership Foundation from that decision by John.
And that's why we're part of Equip. We're part of Equip because of the impact, the eternal impact that it makes. And I love what you said, RD, and I want the staff to hear this. He said, sees before and sees more, or sees more and sees before. And that is very important about being on the cutting edge, being at the forefront of not letting change happen to you, but you implement change before it's actually could be too late and you gotta have to play catch up. What are some of the best lessons that you've learned in the brief time that I've had with John? And one thing that I learned was his early morning hours were critical. He'd take out his yellow pad, I believe, and he would just start writing, and then he'd take a picture of it and send it off to what's that beautiful lady? His Eggers, Linda Eggers.
Linda Eggers.
Linda would take it, and Linda would type it out, and then this was John's thought for the day. Yes. And I love that discipline that every single morning and every single day he is waking up. Now, granted, he doesn't have any children to get ready for school and all of that. That's a nice thing to have. But granted, his daily disciplines are the same. That's one of the lessons I took away from John. In fact, when I was with John, I took a whole notes on my page and I sent it to him. It was, this kind of thing, right?
Yes.
And I had tons of notes from that whole time. This is what you said. Never have a. I ask, how do you finish well? How do you finish well? Like I'm too early to be asking that question, but it's a good question. How do I finish well? He goes, never have a finish line. Wow. I wrote that down. Never have a finish line.
Yes.
Never have a finish line.
Game.
Once you say you have a finish line, you're finished. That's what he said.
Exactly right.
So that's what I grabbed and I sent it all back to him. He says, nobody's ever sent me my notes back before. My dad.
Good job.
So, RT, what are some of the gems that you've learned since you've been with John? Maybe one or two.
Well, you pointed out a great one right there, and that is that success doesn't happen in a day, but it does happen daily. And every great leader has gotten a hold of their daily agenda. I mean, there's a lot of things as leaders we don't have a choice in, but we do have a choice on what's going to fill our time. And if a person will get a long view of something, not a short view, that's kind of the point of the infinite game also. John loves Simon Sinek's book, The Infinite Game, and the idea being that there isn't a finish line. Because when you take the long view of things, then you can really put a lot of power and belief in a day. Because I don't have to have this today, but I have to make this day something that I have control over. And so in John's mind, if there are 4 or 5 things every day that a leader will decide, I'm going to do these 5 things every day. The power of 5 is something that's virtually, God's the only thing omnipotent. But as human beings go, if you do 5 things every day and you stay on it and you don't cut yourself any slack and you keep that commitment and you do it every day, you cannot lose in that area. And he illustrates it by talking about a tree. And he said, if you got a tree in the front yard and you go out every day with a good sharp axe and take 5 good swings, eventually that tree's coming down. So our problem is we'll do 5 one day, 2 the next day, skip 2 or 3 days, go back and do 20, and then skip 3 days and then go back and do 10. And he said, that's the problem. We have got to do it every day. 5 good swings every day. And if we have 5 that we could pick out, and John says every day, how do you write all these books, John? Every day I read. Every day I think. Every day I ask myself questions. Every day I file the truths he gets. He takes out of a book and puts it in a file, so he keeps it. And every day I write. And that's how he writes New York Times bestsellers and how he sells, almost 40,000 books and written 90, I think. He's got a new one. They redid his 21 Irrefutable Laws of book for the 25th anniversary of that book this year. And I think it comes out next week, in fact. So that's how.
I love it, RD. I wish the staff could hear what you're saying, but they're going to listen to this. And because this is gold, 5 things every single day. And I love it. I was thinking about something I'm thinking about writing another book. In fact, I think I am. I'm going to start another book.
Mike, don't stop writing. You have good things to say, buddy. Don't stop. Keep it up. Because books go where you can't go, and they live on after you. So keep writing, buddy.
Yeah, I will. Hey, RD, who's your favorite sports team? What's your favorite sport?
Well, I grew up in Ohio, and we didn't have one other thing to do but Ohio State football. I mean, that was it. We didn't really have anything else to do but that. So I grew up loving Ohio State. In the 70s when I was a kid, the Cincinnati Reds were the greatest team in baseball with Pete Rose, Joe Morgan, Johnny Bench, and all those guys, George Foster. So I love the Reds, and they're about the worst team that exists in the world right now.
The Reds were awesome. My dad loved Johnny Bench.
Oh yeah,
Dave Concepcion.
Yes, of course. Always crossed.
You never thought I'd bring up that name, Dave.
I'm
Concepcion.
So proud, buddy. So proud.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Pete Rose, Charlie Hustle.
Yes.
And my dad was a baseball player. He got drafted. Well, he had a free agent contract offered to him in 1964 with the Milwaukee Braves when they were the Milwaukee Braves.
Wow.
And I know. And he turned it down because he's getting married and couldn't put mom on hold. And
that might have been a good choice, Mike.
Yeah, I think it's a good choice. I wouldn't be here if you went there. Anyway.
Yeah.
RD, can we do this again?
Too. I grew up as a
you
Lakers
like the Lakers?
fan. Yeah.
Nah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, I was a Magic Johnson fan, I think. Maybe.
Okay, I can take that. That. I was a Detroit Pistons fan.
Were you really? The nasty boy.
Oh, yeah. I was one of six in the state of Hawaii that loved the bad boys. Yeah. Anyway, let's talk life and sports the next time we do this. Can we do this again?
Yeah, I'd love to, buddy.
I appreciate you very much, RD. Appreciate you so much. Have a great time at the golf tournament. Give my love to everybody on the staff and the team. I'll be there next year. I'll be at another one coming up here. And we love Equip. We love John Maxwell. Give our regards to John. And thank you, RD, for your friendship and your time. RD, have you written a book yet?
I haven't. I've got 2 one that's half done and another idea that I've conceptualized that everyone says, you need to do that one first. So I got to get on it, buddy. I got to quit slacking.
Yeah, I would love to hear.
I just work for a crazy man. I don't have any time. So
right.
But exactly. you got to decide the 5 things you're going to do every day. And
exactly. I totally understand. Thank you, RD. We will look forward to seeing you too. Love you too. Thank you for everything.
Blessings.
Okay, aloha.
Hey everybody, thank you for joining us. Now don't forget to hit subscribe to receive the latest episodes. And I would love for you to follow me on Instagram at Mike Kai and let me know what you got out of this week's podcast. I'll see you next week where we're helping to take your leadership from one peak to the next.